Now, this should be a concern to those of you in the room that are supervisors and managers, because it means you're paying people to screw things up for your team. But I actually think it should be a concern to all of us, because it means that millions of people are waking up every day unhappy, unfulfilled, sometimes depressed, not showing up fully for themselves, their families, their communities, or the world at large. Think about the impact those people could be having on the world if they were actually doing meaningful work, if they were actually doing something they truly cared about. Now, this statistic means a lot to me because a few years ago, I was one of those 70%. I was 28 at the time, living in Washington, D.C., working a job for the US federal government. And on paper, everything was perfect. I had a great job, I had a great salary, I had health care, I had benefits, I had job security. You literally cannot get fired from working for the United States federal government. Trust me, there's some people who probably should. And I'd go to happy hour every day and tell everyone, I'm the special assistant to the director of global operations at the US Peace Corps. They were so impressed. They'd ask for my business card. My parents were impressed. My boss was impressed. My friends were impressed. Everything was perfect about this job, except for one tiny, kind of important thing. I was miserable. How did I know I was miserable? Every single morning when my alarm clock would go off at 6 in the morning, I'd feel a shooting pain go up and down my back. I felt it when I got out of bed, when I brushed my teeth, when I put on my suit and tie, when I left the house, when I took the bus to work, when I scanned my ID badge in at the office, when I rode the elevator up to the 8th floor, when I was sitting at my desk typing memos and talking points, when we were in meetings talking about best practices, when my boss would email me every single night on my BlackBerry at 10 p.m. and then again at 4 in the morning. The pain was so bad it actually turned into shingles on my side. Shingles is gross. Shingles is a nerve disease that's often related to stress that's common among people over the age of 70, not 20-somethings. And I was spending a lot of time in this period overdosing on FOMO, fear of missing out, spending a lot of time on Facebook, worried about what my friends were doing. So there was my buddy that was going to business school, and I was like, maybe I should get my MBA. There was a friend who was going to become a teacher, and I was like, maybe I should become a teacher. There was a friend, she was opening her own food truck, and I was like, maybe I should open up a food truck, even though I'm not a good cook and I'm an even worse driver. And a buddy of mine who I went to school with, who I went to college with, he'd already graduated from one of the top law schools in the country, got a job at the top corporate law firm in New York City, was making well over 6 figures, and I saw a photo of him on Instagram. And he's traveling with his girlfriend in Peru, and he's proposing at sunset in front of Machu Picchu. And I'm like, man, like this guy, like he's got this amazing job, he's making all this money, he lives in a penthouse apartment in New York City, he's getting married, like I hate my job, like I hate my life, like I can't even get a date on Tinder, like my life is ruined. I'm never gonna make it. And it was actually only when I got off Facebook and met other young people going through the exact same thing I was that I was able to turn this quarter-life crisis into a breakthrough. So today, I just want to teach you a few lessons I learned on my journey that can help you find meaningful work and think about how to help the people around you and your teams and your companies and your organization find meaning and purpose in their work. So the first lesson I learned is that you have to surround yourself with believers. You have to find people that believe in the beauty of your dreams. Because when I was back in DC, I used to come home every night to my roommate, Dan. And I'd be like, Dan, I don't like my job. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to move across the country. I want to live in California. I want to live in San Francisco. I want to become a writer. I want to start surrounding myself with entrepreneurs that are chasing their dreams. Dan would kind of look at me, roll his eyes, take a swig of beer, take another swig of beer, and say, Smiley, suck it up, man. Everyone hates their job. It's part of life. I was like, suck it up. Like I was 28 at the time, which is old, but not like that old. I really didn't want to spend the next 30, 40 years of my life depressed, right? But the truth is the majority of the world thinks like Dan. That's why 70% of Americans and 80% of people globally are disengaged with their work. Because they're like, suck it up, you're not supposed to like your job. Just go to work and have a beer on Friday. So then I met believers. I went to a program called StartingBloc, the StartingBloc Institute for Social Innovation, which brings together people that are interested in using business for good, interested in using business for social change. And at StartingBloc, I met believers. I met people like Debbie. Debbie was starting Goldilocks, which is a toy company that teaches young girls to become engineers. I met people like Ted. Ted started MoneyThink, which is a nonprofit in Chicago that teaches financial literacy and entrepreneurship to urban youth. I met people like Tom. Tom started Rising Tide Car Wash, which is a small business in Florida that employs people with autism. So I met people like Debbie and Ted and Tom, and they were like, wait a second, Smiley, wait a second. Like, you want to move across the country? You want to start writing? You want to start supporting social entrepreneurs? Like, you have to do that. If you don't do it, who the hell's going to do it? Because the crazy thing happens when you find believers, you actually also find accountability. Now, people like Debbie and Ted and Tom, they weren't talking about making lots of money. They weren't talking about rising up the corporate ladder. They weren't talking about getting featured in Fast Company or TechCrunch. No. They were talking about how they could use their skills, their access, their privilege to empower others less fortunate than them. They were talking about how to make the world more innovative, more compassionate, more sustainable. So we hear all the time in the media, oh, millennials, they're just the entitled generation, the lazy generation, the me generation, the selfie generation. And we do take a lot of selfies, so that part's kind of true. But I actually think most of those stereotypes couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is that 50% of millennials, that's many of you in this room, would take a pay cut to find work that matches their values. 90% want to use their skills for good. 75% think businesses are too focused on their own agendas and not focused enough on improving society. So despite unprecedented levels of unemployment, the jobs crisis, high student debt, we're a generation that wants to work with purpose. So great, Smiley. Millennials want meaning. Everyone wants meaning. What does that mean? How do you actually do that? The next lesson I learned is that you have to stop comparing yourself to others and start pursuing what's meaningful to you. Because I went back and I interviewed my friend, the baller corporate lawyer. I was like, man, you got it all figured out. You're making well over 6 figures. You're working for this top corporate law firm. You're living in New York. You're married. Like, what's your secret? What am I doing wrong? You know what he told me? After 3 years of law school, landing a job at one of the top law firms in the world, he was miserable in his job as a corporate lawyer. He was going to go back to graduate school at the age of 30 to become a high school social studies teacher, a history teacher, which is great for him, but what's the lesson there? The grass is always greener, right? We think everyone on Facebook and Instagram has it all figured out. Their lives look so beautiful. Everyone's figuring out, right? Stop comparing yourself to others. Start pursuing what's meaningful to you. Not your friends on Facebook, not your boss, not your parents. Why are you here? What do you care about? And I came across this amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning. Has anyone read this book by Viktor Frankl? Highly recommended reading. Everyone should read this book. Who is Viktor Frankl? He was a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. He survived living in a Nazi concentration camp during which pretty much everyone around him was being killed, including his own family, his wife who was pregnant. And he was talking to people and interviewing them about how they were going on in the face of almost certain death, right? They weren't going to die tomorrow, maybe they would die next week. And he writes in this book that being humans always points and is directed to something or someone other than oneself, be it a meaning to fulfill or another human being to encounter. The more one forgets himself by giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love, the more human he is. So that meaning comes not from what we've been taught by society, accumulating wealth and status and power, but from giving it away, from love, from service, from compassion. I don't think this means that we're all going to go work at a charity or a nonprofit or in the developing world. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that we need to approach our work, our business, our products from a point of sharing our gifts with others. And when you think about meaningful work, I think this is about a framework, right? It's about asking the right questions. There's no one definition for meaning, but when I started interviewing people for this book, I found that there were a lot of similar themes. Meaningful work reflects who you are. Again, not your friends on Facebook, who you are and what your interests are. Allows you to share your gifts to help others, provides a community of believers that will support your dreams, and is financially viable given your desired lifestyle. That last piece is incredibly important. We're not talking about how to take a meaningful vacation, right? This is meaningful work. It has to pay the bills. For those of you that are more visual learners, I think this is about alignment. How can you align your unique gifts with the impact you want to have, surround yourself with the right people, both at work and at home and in your community, and live the quality of life that you want? And if we were all to fill out this diagram right now, I guarantee you we'd have about 500 different definitions of alignment, right? Because we're all different. Some of you are great communicators, some of you are great coders, some of you are great at raising money, some of you are great at government and politics. Some of you want to have an impact locally on your block, with your church, with your organization. Some of you are trying to have a global impact. Everyone wants to surround themselves with different people, and everyone has different standards of quality of life. Now, Debbie, she started Goldilocks, a toy company that actually teaches young girls how to become engineers because of the discrimination that she faced when she was one of the only female engineering students at Stanford University. Ted started MoneyThink in Chicago because when he was growing up, he realized he had a lot of opportunities that his friends in Chicago didn't have. Tom started Rising Tide Car Wash because he saw how hard it was for his own brother to get a job because his own brother has autism. So they had a personal connection to their work because meaning is personal. And stepping back and thinking about, okay, what does this mean for the workplace today and millennials and generations? Here are some things. This is from a global study that Gallup did about what millennials are looking for. And I think a lot of you will say, when you look at this, everyone wants this stuff, and it's exactly true. So they're not just looking for a paycheck. They want purpose and meaning, the sense that your work is contributing to something greater than yourself, greater than the walls of your organization, greater than the mission statement. It's actually moving the needle forward on something that matters in the world. Not just job satisfaction, but personal development, a chance for learning, a chance for growth. Not just a boss or a supervisor, but a coach, a mentor, someone to guide them throughout their lives. Not just annual reviews, but frequent feedback and conversations. I talk to a lot of young people, and they're like, 12-month annual review? Like, I don't even remember what happened last week. We're talking about 12 months ago? You know? So you have to have those conversations on a more ongoing basis. All about developing strengths, and the sense that their job is not just a job, it's their life. It defines who they are. It's at the core of their identity. And a lot of research has been done that shows that actually it's not just millennials that want this stuff. Surprise, everyone does. IBM did a great study that showed that when it comes to what the main things people are looking for in work, millennials, Gen Xers, and baby boomers, essentially everyone in the workplace, and Gen Z's coming right along next, is looking for the same things, right? Everyone wants to make a positive impact on their organization, solve social challenges, work with a diverse group of people, work for an organization that's respected in their industry, do work they're passionate about, and become an expert in the field. When you're thinking about employee engagement, 4 main areas to think about. Again, this is for everyone of all generation. Purpose. So employees who have meaning in their work are almost twice as engaged. Value. Feeling cared for by your supervisor is the single biggest reason people stay in their jobs. For all the advances in technology today, the main reason that someone wants to show up in the work in the morning is because they have a great boss. How old school is that, right? Renewal. Employees who take a break every 90 minutes are more engaged when they come back. That is to say, employees who actually leave the office and are like, I'm out, gotta go, right? And they go outside, they meditate, they sit in the sun, they have a cup of coffee, they call their mom. When they come back, they do better work, they feel better. Focus. This is incredibly difficult for both myself and the young people in the room, right? The ability to focus on one task at a time. Very few of the people that were surveyed by this research, which is from Harvard Business Review, said that they were able to focus on one task at a time, but when they did, they were almost 50% more engaged with their work. So how can you create incentives for your colleagues, for your team, to focus on one thing at a time? So there's a complete disconnect between what employees say is the most important thing to them, which is meaning in their day-to-day work, and what their bosses, their business leaders say is the most important thing to them, which is their reputation for growth and innovation, right? So every time we hear purpose, we hear innovation, we hear change. It's on every single website of every major company in the world. Go to their website. We're building a purpose-driven world. But when you actually ask their bosses what really matters, it's not the employees' meaning in their day-to-day work. So that needs to change. So 65% of today's kids that are in elementary school are going to end up in jobs that haven't been invented yet. They're going to end up in a job that if we were to know the job title today, we'd be like, excuse me, what the hell is that? Right? We wouldn't even know what it is, which makes sense because when I graduated college about 12 years ago, Facebook wasn't even a thing. It was just getting off the ground. Think about all the jobs that exist in social media and data and analytics that weren't around even just 5, 10 years ago. What are the jobs going to be in the next 5 to 10 years? So the average millennial is staying in their job about 2 to 3 years, which is not that long. The average person of any age is staying in their job just 5 years, not that long either. So I think we need to rethink how we're telling young people how to approach their careers. So if you think about it, traditionally we've had this ladder, this linear career ladder. You jump on, you major in college, you pick one thing, and then you just go at it the rest of the time. That's no longer applicable in a world that's moving so fast with technology changing so quickly. So I like to encourage people to think of their career as a pond of lily pads spread out in all directions. And you can make a shift, you can make a change based on what's meaningful to you. The roots of the lily pads are all connected. That's what you care about. That's the type of impact you want to have. Now, looking at this doesn't mean you should quit your job every 6 months. That's not what I'm saying. You will both be broke and piss off a lot of your employers. Millennial turnover alone costs US companies $30 billion a year. Retention and turnover is one of the highest costs that many major companies face. But I think this does mean that you have to approach your career from a point of learning, a growth mindset where you're constantly evolving, constantly learning new things. So one whole quarter of these lily pads, one slide of this, a piece of this pie, that might just be one job, one company. But every few months you're saying, well, I'm going to learn how design thinking impacts this. I'm going to start a women in tech group at my organization. I'm going to learn how blockchain impacts my business. You know, I'm going to be constantly learning and growing even within my role. So I like to say that HR is the new life coach. If you think about HR, human resources, it's always had this really negative connotation. Think about depictions of HR in the media. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show The Office, right? It's like, oh, I got to go see Toby in HR, like my life is ruined, like, HR. I actually think that in the world of work today and in the future, HR are the cool kids. The folks that know their talent, they know their people, they know their passions, their dreams, they know who they are, they know where they want to be in 6 months, in a year, in 3 years, and they can help them get there. They can also help them jump to the next thing. Yes, I said that right. I think in the HR office of today, you need to be thinking how to motivate your talent and then help them leave your company. Yes, because they're not going to stay there for 10 years. Maybe a few people will, and that's great, but that's the exception, not the rule. So how can we help them learn and grow, do a great job, make an impact, go on to the next thing so that they can recommend their best friend for the job who's even better at the job than they are, and they still keep supporting the organization and the product as they go through their career. So I'm going to tell a quick story before I wrap up here, because I think this gets at the heart of it. So a few years ago, I was back in San Francisco, and I was biking home. I like to bike. I don't use a car. I bike everywhere, trying to save the planet. So I'm little steps. So I'm biking home, minding my business, and all of a sudden, this guy bikes alongside me, and he's like, hey, my name's Bernat. I was like, I don't know who you are. Leave me alone. Like, who is this guy talking to me? He's like, my name's Bernat. I'm from Spain. I just moved here. I was like, please stop talking to me. Like, you got to be careful in San Francisco talking to some strangers, right? Keeps biking alongside me. He's like, my name's Bernat. I'm from Barcelona. I'm a designer, a UX, UI designer, user experience designer. I'm looking for a job here in San Francisco. There's really, really bad unemployment in Spain right now. I can't get a job in Spain right now. I really want to find a job here. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Barcelona is a beautiful city. One of my best friends used to live there. And this guy, Bernat, asked me, he's like, so what are you working on? What do you do? What are you working on? I tell him I'm working on this book. And he's like, okay, cool. Do you have a cover designer yet? I'm like, no. He's like, well, go home, check out my website. Maybe we can work together. So I go home, I check out this guy Bernat's website. I was like, man, this guy's like a kick-ass designer. He's really good. Like his CGI, UX, UI, he's done all these things. So I post on Facebook, just met this crazy weirdo Bernat when I was biking home in San Francisco. He hails from Spain. He's looking for a job, a UX job. If you know of anything, let him know. About 5 minutes later, my buddy Yi comments on the thread. He's like, oh, Bernat should talk to my friend Mark. They're doing a mobile startup in Palo Alto. There's like 4 of them. They don't really know what they're doing. They don't have a lead designer. Maybe they can work together. So Bernat meets with the team about a couple weeks later. He ends up getting hired to be the lead designer for the startup. He gets a work visa to stay in the United States, which is a very big deal. He ends up designing the cover for my first book. And then I don't hear from him for like 2 years. He thanks me, but then I don't hear from this guy for like 2 years. All of a sudden, I get a text message out of the blue from Bernat. Smiley, I'm taking you out to dinner, anywhere you want to go. I was like, sweet, like I'd love to get taken out to dinner. Like I'm a broke writer, like this is fantastic, like great. So we go to this really nice restaurant in San Francisco, order a bottle of wine, fried chicken, the steak, everything. And I'm like, Bernat, why are you taking me out to dinner? Like, we can split the check, what's going on? Turns out the mobile startup he had been working for had just been acquired by Yahoo for $80 million. He's the lead designer, he's the fourth employee, he obviously has equity in the company, he can definitely afford to take me out to dinner. And he's like, Smiley, thank you, this wouldn't have happened without you. And I was like, nah, man, thank you, right? This guy talked to a random stranger in a city he didn't live in a country he wasn't from, on a bicycle. Who does that, right? So how can you channel your inner Bernat, right? How can you make those bold asks? And then for those of you that are supervisors and building out your teams and your startups and your companies, how can you empower the people around you to feel comfortable enough to make those crazy asks, to actually feel included, to say what they want, to have that seat at the table, to have that voice, to feel like they can show up with their whole self every day at work, and to make asks that are a little bit out there, right? That are kind of like, who is this guy? I can't believe they're asking me these things. So the greatest opportunities for you to engage your purpose-driven employees, provide that alignment, allow folks to make an impact. Add that value, have people be able to keep learning and become intrapreneurs. Everyone is so excited about entrepreneurship, but I always say, think about how you could align that spirit within a company, right? Within an organization. Whether it's a government, whether it's a company, whether it's a social venture, how can you take that entrepreneurial spirit and build something out within an organization? And if you run an organization, you want those entrepreneurs working within your walls, right? You don't want them just at a coffee shop on their own without funding. You want to bring them in. You want that spirit with you. And allow people to have that autonomy. I think that's what this is all about. Allow people to constantly reinvent their career and experiment. So what they're doing on day 10 is different than day 5, different than day 54, different than day 103. You're constantly learning, constantly growing. And I got to run through these. If you want, email me and I'll send you these slides because we don't have enough time today. But I think what this really is about is this sense that company culture really matters. The main reason people leave a job is to go to a firm with a better company culture, right? That is the main reason. This is from Glassdoor, which is kind of the Yelp of company reviews. The main reason people leave is to go to a firm that has a better company culture. And company culture is about value. It's about allowing people to show up as their full selves. So in closing, I truthfully believe that we're not the me generation, that we're the purpose generation, and we'll be engaged with our work because we have to be. The challenges facing the next generation and the generation that's coming after are simply too serious to ignore. They're too serious to only worry about after 5 o'clock or on Friday nights or on the weekends. So we cannot be stuck in a quarter-life crisis, a third-life crisis, a midlife crisis, an end-of-life crisis, because the stakes, I believe, are too high. Thank you all so much for being here today.